Nigetara hitotsu, susumeba futatsu, tene haru. In many ways, I adore failure. I encourage the kids that I teach to fail with confidence. It's by far one of the best ways to learn how to do something right. In my Dungeons & Dragons sessions, I love failure because it makes the stories that we create so much more interesting. How else can you add stakes to a campaign where everything always goes right for your players? Failure is often a good metric of progress as well. When you started to practice that piece on your guitar, where are the sections that really give you trouble? How did you go about working those sections out? How does your progress on the piece now compare to your progress a month ago? And what sections still stand out as the sharp edges that need sanding down? All of these are reasons to celebrate failure. The downside, of course, is that failing sucks. God, what an awful feeling. I want to be right and correct and perfect all the time, and not have anything bad ever happen, and give me all the A's, and win all my games, and let me slay the dragon, and win the heart of the princess without ever having to reload, and let me be the one person in a million who takes an instrument out of its case for the very first time and plays like Mozart, like Hendrix, like I built the sky. I worry, I think, that as I get better at something, my brain begins to expect a certain level of expertise. A subconscious feeling sets in that if I go to do this thing that I think I'm good at, I damn sure better do it well, or else I will, in fact, not have done the thing, but will have failed. And not the good kind of failure here. This is the personal failure, the not living up to your potential failure, the toxic failure that can keep you from trying something in the first place. So last year, when I was visiting home on vacation, and I picked up an uncompleted Gundam kit from my childhood, I realized two things. Just how relaxing and zen-like it felt to build that kit, and that I might need to be mindful about just how good I could let myself feel I had gotten about any progress or skills I gained as I went headfirst back into the hobby. Mostly though, I just wanted to build some plastic anime robots and thin out the background noise in my brain. My goal with this video is to look back through the past year to see how I dealt with that creeping potential of failure, both the bad and the good, if there is any. Join me, won't you, as we part the mists of time to view my burgeoning re-obsession with Gundam. There are better, longer, and more in-depth primers on Gunpla than I'm going to attempt here, but here's the short and tall geese of it. The original first Gundam show back in the 1970s only survived because the model kits sold so well. Gunpla, Gundam and plastic model, currently earns Bandai Namco, let me see here, holy crap, almost $1 billion last year? Really? Good grief, I was expecting a high number, but billion with a B? I mean, I can look at my counter and see my backlog that I built up, but my god, Gundam. This is absurd! Okay, anyway. Tools. Oh dear god, you can have just so many. But the only two I'd call essential are these: a nipper and a hobby knife. Nipper to cut parts off the runners, and a hobby knife to clean up the nubs that are left over. I could do a whole video on tools. Don't make me. Or maybe make me. That's up to y'all, really.
That's up to y'all, really.
The last and most important thing you need is the kit itself. But Baragon, I hear you ask, and I do hear you. I've taken good care of my ears. They're called musicians' earplugs. Look them up. Don't go to a concert without them. How do I choose? There are so many to choose from, literally thousands. Fear not, here's a very brief rundown of the various types of Gundam kits. High-grade kits are likely to be most people's entryway into the hobby. If you see a Gundam show and like any of the giant fancy robots, there's a high-grade kit out there for you. 1 to 144th scale of the real size of the machine, reasonably inexpensive, with exceptions, and usually simpler to put together, with fewer parts and accessories, again, depending on the kit. High grades can be put together in as little as an afternoon, or longer depending on how careful you want to be about the details. Usually around $20 to $30 USD. Master grade kits are the bigger, more complicated siblings of the high grades. Standing larger at 1 to 100th scale, master grade kits are generally bigger than high grade kits, with a few exceptions, and come with an inner frame that adds to the complexity and detail. Fewer produced kits overall, but many popular mobile suits have had more than one release to push the tech forward. The most expensive regular line, usually 40 to 70 USD. Real grade kits are the meeting of the other two main grades. Often referred to as master grade complexity in high grade size, these 1 to 144th scale kits come with those master grade style inner frames. The tech for those inner frames was imperfect in the beginning, leading to what's known as early real grade syndrome, where real grade joints would start to noticeably weaken within the first several months of building them. While I've experienced this degradation myself, I don't regret the early real grade I built at all, which we'll get to. Newer real grade sets are beyond impressive in terms of how well they hold up, and how intricate and well designed the builds are. There are just over 40 real grade kits, as it's the newest line, but they're often on the cutting edge of Gunpla technology. Also, priced in between high grade and master grade, likely 30 to 50 USD. There are several other less populated lines, the Reborn 100s, the entry grades, the full mechanics, the perfect grades, Ecopla, and others, but that's a longer exploration for perhaps another time. So there you have it, a primer on the various grades of Gunpla. What really matters though is this: which one do you want to build? Which Gundam gets you excited? If you have one, that's the kit you should go ahead and build. There is a very small number of models that are considered grenades by the community that might stop a nascent builder on their first kit, but I'll drop a mention of those at the end. For me, coming back to a kit that is almost 30 years old with no expectations, I had no idea of any of this. But when it comes to useless trivia, I am a sponge that could soak up the ocean entire. This kit is, in many ways, an obvious relic. Back in the day, when I picked up a few kits to try, they were all from Gundam Wing. It was the first show that got me hooked on Gundam, after all, and when Toonami aired G Gundam and First Gundam as follow-ups, I thought one was far too ridiculous, the stupidest series I've ever watched all the way through twice, and the other started to suffer from a lack of consistent broadcasting, thanks 9/11. I do remember seeing most of the 8th MS Team too, so even though my knowledge of other series came mostly through fan publications and the early internet, I was hooked, lined, and sinkered. My very first kit was a Death Scythe Hell that technically doesn't even have a grade to compare to other models. It was simple, it was reasonably easy to put together, and it looks like someone took my beloved edgelord boy and melted him in a microwave. I was also dabbling with TTRPGs at this point, getting deep in the trenches with the Lord of the Rings tabletop game, and even sticking my toes into that dread ocean that is Warhammer 40k. So my thoughts for any further kits was that, since I was painting all of these tiny Gondorians and Ultramarines, obviously I would need to paint my Gundams too. And also, just as obviously, my next kits had to be from Endless Waltz, the Gundam Wing follow-up movie that my teenage brain thought was one of the best things he'd ever seen. Well, I got started painting the high-grade 1/100th scale Wing Gundam, and then I graduated and went to college. When I pulled Heavyarms out of the garage 20 years later, I had only the memories of my old skills to rely on, and none of the mountain of hobby tools that I would develop as my obsession deepened. This meant that I was starting off with nothing but a borrowed X-Acto knife and a Gundam model that was almost 30 years old. Dealing with a kit like that, with a tool that might have even been improved on with some kitchen scissors, was rough in retrospect. It also taught me about pressure and the release thereof, when a small piece getting cut off its runner would sometimes go ping and launch itself into orbit. This was the first time I would have to spend at least half an hour sifting through a room to find a tiny bit of godforsaken plastic, but it would not be even close to the last. Another downside to older kits is older adhesive on the stickers. I like that I thought of using some glue to hold these down, but the application process, well, it left a little to be desired. Also, this figure of Troa is so much bigger than anything that would ever be included with a kit these days, and practically screams to be painted. So, an inexpert, rusty, novice hand ends up with a kit that is messy, nubbed up, and unable to really deal with the weight of all those armaments, thanks to old tech. Was I glad to have it finally up and assembled after all these years? Absolutely. I was just starting out, you see, so there were no expectations, no standards to live up to, just a new thing to try and enjoy, and I did. Enough so that I decided that I might want to dip more than just a toe back into the water. As I got further and further into the hobby over the course of the year, it started to become clear to me that a real revolution in how kits were designed and made really started to come at about the mid-2010s, and that's where I ended up next. While technically not the next kit I bought, that would be the real grade Sazabi, this one was specifically purchased to try out the new box of tools that I had picked up and some shiny new nippers that were my first admission that I might now have a burgeoning problem on my hands. Admitting this problem might have been the first step, but God knows what the next one might be. I had done some research on which Gundam I might want to do next, but lo and behold, the area where I grew up and was visiting for winter vacation was not exactly flush with every single Gunpla out there, so this one was chosen purely on what I believe would be referred to as vibes. I wouldn't even start watching Zeta for the first time until later that year, for God's sake. Regardless, I thought that I might be able to take the step up from a 30-year-old large-scale high-grade to a smaller kit with higher complexity from just over 10 years ago. Still, quite the step up in quality, right? The increase in detail was instantly apparent. An instruction booklet that was almost twice as long, many more runners to deal with, and worst of all, a very small supply of tubing materials to measure out and cut at incredibly precise measurements. What a cool and anxiety-inducing gimmick to include. I spent most of the build terrified that each cut of the fabric or the wiring to go inside would either be too small and necessitate a redo, or that I would just run out before I was done. Did I successfully finish the build? Yes, I did. Did I have to eventually glue some parts down because I'd accidentally cut off supporting struts or glued down piping that did, in fact, end up being too short? Yes. But I was proud because I'd kicked up the difficulty and ended up with a better looking product than the first time. Still too early for thoughts of, now I'm good at this, so I'm not allowed to be bad. Aerial was the first official build of 2024. Now, we were working on a kit that was less than a year old, and oh my, did the leaps and bounds in Gunpla technology really shine through. Reverse-sided stickers, custom-made permit score parts, and incredible posing potential. This was probably the first kit that I can safely say I didn't have any major screw-ups on. I even upped my game by trying out some panel lining using some basic Gundam markers, where you fill in some line sections that look like they would be different parts on the real Gundam. The pop-out of detail is so incredibly apparent when you panel line, it quickly became one of my favorite parts of doing builds. Just a wonderful kit of my favorite modern Gundam design. Don't worry, there are things to look back on and find fault with, but that's in retrospect, and it's the failures during the builds that I'm mostly interested in. Let's see if we can't do some jumping ahead to find some more of that. I was never a fan of the Unicorn, but then I built this kit. Now, I'm a fan. All those tiny, fiddly little pieces came together in a way that was very satisfying to see. I also used the Razor Gun Primer for the first time here. The Nu Gundam is my favorite Gundam design, period. It's the right color blend, it has the best helmet, and is from my favorite Gundam movie. This entry grade is solid, simple, beginner-friendly, looks great, and is a reminder that the Nu Gundam is one of the largest hero Gundams around. Here's a quick plug for entry grades, which have fewer parts than other grades, and those parts are designed to be pulled off the runners using your fingers. Oh, hang on, I think that sticker is slightly off. Damn it! Gosh, this one got raved about online and it was a solid build. I even got to try out Poor-style panel line markers for the first time, but I just didn't vibe with this one nearly as much. Is the failure on this one just my lack of taste? My drive to try and do unique kits to push my skills continued, and boy, did I run into a wall with this one. Designed during an era where Gundam's parent company was trying to save money on the plastic used in Gunpla production, the F91 is much smaller than a typical mobile suit. This tiny little kit was also the first that I used top coat on to give it a more professional, non-plastic look. Well, I majorly botched the panel lining, and the top coat ended up uneven and poorly done. I am so sorry, F91, I did you dirty. I'm glad you weren't a set that I was really looking forward to, or else it would just hurt that much worse. My first 1/100th scale kit that wasn't the ancient Heavyarms. I had never seen this Gundam before, but after seeing the Reborn 100 GP04, that shield, those incredibly long stern boosters, that shield, the massive shoulders, that shield, I knew it would be one to try. Plus, the RE line was meant to highlight lesser-known models without giving them the full detail of a master-grade kit. So, yes, less color separation, no full inner frame, and fewer parts than even the real grades. Failure levels here? Almost non-existent. I'm so proud of this build. I even managed to get the pain-in-the-ass shield stickers just about right. Still imperfect, I know, but I was and am and will be over the moon that my first non-high-grade 1/100th scale attempt went so well. Wait, what's that under the shoulder? Oh no. My first real broken part. To be fair to myself, I have no idea how it happened. The parts just didn't fit together. I tried to remove and reconnect a few times and then, crack! Part ruined. Thankfully, I can just keep the shoulder on and move along in blissful denial. Oh, and also, this kit had a piece that pinged off so hard that it took me an entire day to track down that tiny little bastard that it was. After nearly tearing my hair out, I finally located it in the cup of my headphones. Seriously, little bastard. My fastest build since the madness truly gripped me, which means probably 8 or 9 hours of work over 4 days or so while on vacation. I had the extreme good fortune to make this one with a friend, who I left it with. Godspeed, high-grade Nu Gundam. Several of your siblings say hello. If there's one thing that was a recurring theme over this year of working on Gunpla, besides failure, it's that I've been surprised by so many kits. At first, I was worried that there would be only so many models that I wanted to make, which had me worried about investing in all of these tools. Then, there were kits that I thought, oh, this will be a fun thing to build while I'm waiting, prepping for the kits I actually want to build, that ended up becoming some of my favorites. The real grade Unicorn was the first, but the real grade Wing Gundam may be the example that changed my mind the most. I only fully realized how much I admired it as I was putting the finishing touches on. Somehow, I'd made it through the whole year without a single Gundam that had wings, and clipping on the backpack and unfurling them for the first time, just wow. How amazing that you can think you know exactly what you're getting when you buy one of these things. Believe me, this was the surprise find at a GameStop of all places while visiting home on a break, and hey, nobody else here has a kit that looks good, and it's from the show what I first liked, Gunpla. Look at it though. Majestic. A gift from the friend who I left the high-grade Nu Gundam with, and my first true master grade. The first kit that was so focused on melee, I was happy to put the rifle off to the side. The first kit with dry transfer decals, and friends, when I tell you that I failed hard on some of these, you can well believe me. Still, the final product looks amazing with those show tells and all of those decals, especially if you turn it so the sides with the melted decals don't show. It's okay, Sandrock, I know your legs fall off if I look at you funny, and your glorious helmet looks like nothing so much as a rooster's comb, and I know Catra went off and blew up a whole populated colony after he left you behind, but you're gonna get a really cool poncho when Enla's Waltz rolls around. What does it mean to do almost everything right on a project and still be let down? Sometimes the failure is not your own. We'll get to that. It's that a kit truly ends up not living up to your expectations. Is the Master Grade F91 a bad kit? No. It's got that inner gold detailing like the grille of some exotic sports car and strong, clean curves. The top coating came out really nicely this time too, but those big feet don't have the articulation to really give you the poses you want, and the face just isn't quite what I wanted after seeing the box. Sorry, F91, I know I let you down the first time, but this time it's not you, it's me.
Am I so out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong.
And whoops, I put one of the dry transfers on the wrong side. Hey, my very first limited edition Gundam. Yeah, it's a high grade, but I can't wait to really get this one right. Lessons learned here. Clear and hard plastic should be cut with soft nippers, or they may snap, and break, and need glue, and never heal quite right, and ping off 3 whole times. The same piece. And be hard to find in the carpet because they're tiny, and blue, and invisible, and ooh. Looks pretty good now that it's done, though. Since the first Gundam I built this year was from the show that got me back into watching Gundam, The Witch from Mercury, it made sense to wrap up the year with the evolved version of her, the high-grade Aerial rebuild. I still prefer the original Aerial as a design, but the rebuild is such a good reminder of how much a kit can surprise you. I was honestly expecting to be as disappointed with this one as I was with the Calibarn, but just like the Unicorn, the Wing Gundam, and even the Sandrock, as the rebuild began to come together, I began to fall in love. For one thing, I quickly realized that it was a panel liner's paradise with lots of tasty little grooves for the ink to get into. Second, how did I not realize that the backpack looks an awful lot like moth or butterfly wings? Talk about design subtleties flying right over my head. I think the other reason I love the rebuild was that there was so much evidence on how far I've come in the last year. How much I've learned from my mistakes. My nub mark cleanup may not be perfect, but damn, is it getting closer. Certain types of panel lines are still fuzzy and hard to clean up, but I am getting there. When I'm not as focused on details, like when I put together an action base, I can really sing through those parts. I know how much more of what I'm about, and to me at least, the results speak for themselves. Have you ever had that moment where you look at what you've just done and the journey stretches out behind you and you've made it? Yes, there are still more mountains to climb, but this peak right here is yours forever, whatever else comes. This is the best job on a model I've ever done. Screw you, failure. Thanks for leading me here. From the beginning of this process to the end, there was one specter that haunted me through the entire year, rearing its ugly, mocking head at some of the worst possible moments. The closer I got to finishing a build, the specter of "I'm almost done" would appear. Oh hey, just the beam rifle left. Oh hey, just the shield left. This can, and did, lead to nights, and it was almost always nights, of frantic attempts to complete those last few steps before the work week got started, before the trip the next day. Often, this would lead to sloppy nub removal, hasty decal application, and even true mistakes. Something to work on then is to not let the goal of being done get in the way of the focus on the details. Another lesson I so often have to relearn is that I'm not competing against anyone else with these model kits. I'm not even really competing with myself. I want to keep getting better, keep pushing my skills, keep broadening the scope of what I'm capable of, so the bar only gets set by what I've already achieved. Could I also please stop judging how long it takes me to finish a model? Yes, in the beginning it took just a couple of days, but that doesn't take into account all the extra steps that have crept into my process. Using 2 separate nippers for runner and gate removal, using a sander and a finisher on all of the nubs, the panel lining, the cleanup of the panel lining, the stickers, the decals, the top coating, all of it. Building a high-grade kit that the reviews say could take you a day takes me a week at least of work. It's like my brain remembers the faster processes of old and tries to hold me to that standard. It even feeds into that feeling of almost done when there's clearly another day or 2 of work ahead. Not cool, brain. Not cool. Just like so many things that require practice, there are days when it feels like you're on top of the world and your skills come easily and naturally. Then, there are days where even cutting a part off a runner somehow feels complicated. The important thing here is to know that there will be good and bad days and to keep showing up regardless. Choosing to learn from failure, from frustration, from mistakes can often be a difficult choice to make. It is, however, usually the right choice. I know that artists often find that they look back on their old work and find it lacking or embarrassing. A lot of that can be attributed to how far they feel they've come, how much better they are now. For the first time in months, I took a good, hard look at that high-grade aerial that I built almost a year ago after dipping my toes back into Gunpla, and I felt like I understood. There are so many obvious flaws on display, so many obvious nub marks, missed panel lines, etc. It is a kit put together by a beginner, make no mistake. Then, I look over and see the aerial rebuild, with all that progress and effort, knowing both how far I've come and how far I likely still have to go. So for once then, looking back doesn't fill me with cringe, regardless of the obvious mistakes and novice fumbles. I look at the aerial, with all that failure, and I see hope. You mustn't let mistakes weigh you down. Acknowledge them, and take what you've learned to move on. That is the privilege of being a human. Speaking of consistent failure, for those of you thinking about grabbing a Gundam kit for yourself, here's the scuttlebutt that I've gotten from the internet on some of those, lesser kits. Are you ready? Obviously, the farther you go back in time, the less advanced the kits are going to be. That's just the rules. Look at that high-grade Heavyarms that got this whole thing started. So if you have any experience with modern Gunpla design, just be prepared looking further back than 2010. For real grades, the gentle warning about the early RGs holding up to the ravages of short amount of time stands, although I still really like the Mark II that I made. I've heard that the Zeta Gundam is infamously bad, to the point where it's referred to as a full-on hand grenade. This seems to be focused on trying to get it to transform, so some small pinches of salt may be needed here. As for the other landmine, I know I'm mixing explosives, there's the Sinanju, which is really such a shame since it was almost the first new kit that I got. I mean, look at this thing, it's gorgeous, but, apparently this uses that original Gundam Mark II inner frame for a kit that is much bigger and more complicated, leading to a noticeable lack of strength in the build and many parts that will fall off if you so much as look at it funny. Damn shame. Those are the ones I hear about the most, but I've heard rumblings about several others that might bear mentioning, but these are much less agreed upon. Worst Gundam Unicorn might be the master grade. Many of the earlier Verka, so named after veteran mecha designer Hajime Katoki, kits are much more complicated and perhaps might be best saved for a later attempt. High-grade Blooded Orphan kits are apparently not always looked on with fondness. There you go, those are some of the reports I've seen swirling around. My earlier recommendation about finding the Gundam you want to build and building it still stands. If you have any interest in what tools and techniques I've settled on after a year of experimenting, here's the list. I start by panel lining the parts while they're still on the runners. Sometimes you can't get to everything because of the angle, but it's a nice way to kick things off and get a sense for which parts might be where. Do not use poor style panel liners on ABS plastic. They've been known to eat right through. I use high magnification reading glasses for my panel lining and my nub removal process. So yes, glasses on glasses. I use a combination of poor style Gundam markers and fine tip, although I've started dipping my toe into the Mr. Color pot style. A lot of people use cleaning cloths and Q-tips to clean up panel lines, but I've found these cosmetic applicators to be the best of the best to get the job done. I use 2 different nippers, both side cutters, one to clean parts off of the runners, and my brand new God hands to finish the job. Also my hobby knife for special occasions. The Razor gun primer was a real game changer when I first picked it up. Keep your patience with it and check in on your progress often. I usually then follow up with a Razor balancer depending on the finish of the part. I also have a nice brush to get all that dust off of there. Wear a mask to keep that plastic dust out of your lungs. Finally, I have some nice tweezers for putting on stickers and decals. Because of the size of my apartment, I splurged and got this little box unit which has been a real godsend. Unless the parts go ping, the grate holds them nicely and makes cleaning and using the manual a breeze. Be careful about storing nippers in those side holders. They work well, but a dropped nipper can lead to a bent cutting edge, and that sure would be a shame if it happened. Now wouldn't it? I found this storage box a few months ago, great for prepping each piece and section before finally putting it all together at the end. Happy building.